I'm pleasantly surprised by the huge turnout. I think that's fantastic. I'll say a little bit in a moment why this book is important. As self-flagellation for being late, although I got a free copy, having read the book, endorsed it, and agreed to be here today, I will buy a copy from my own pocket, and I will give it to anyone who asks a question that I subjectively deem a particularly good question when we get to the Q&A. The only rule is that you must be a student, and preferably a poor student. So if you're not, please don't ask a clever question too soon until I've given away the prize. I'd hate to accidentally give it to you. I want to say a couple of things, and it's quite surreal actually listening to that CV being read out. Anyone who follows me on Twitter knows that I'm currently taking a break for the next hour in a Twitter war with Helen Ziller about that CV that was read out. So there's a lot to be said for the importance of this book in terms of where it's positioned in South Africa. The way we will proceed is very simple. I'm going to tell you why I like this book, and if I don't like a book, I say so. Just ask Kaid Langa in the Sunday Times 2 weeks ago when I reviewed his. So I will tell you why I like this book. I will stick to 3 minutes, we'll get on with it, and then I'm going to introduce them as they speak in turn. Each one of our three speakers that we have today to make some provocative or not provocative remarks, and then I will open it up to you. I really hope we will have a discussion. The reason why I love this book, as I said in an email to my colleagues that I will introduce, is that the timing is absolutely amazing. It is not just another academic book. This is a book that deserves an audience that looks as diverse as you look, because it is written in such a manner that it is engaging, it's lucid. You do not need a doctorate from Oxford University to understand it, and it affects all of us. And if you think about two hashtags that are trending currently, hashtag roads must fall and hashtag roads so white, it is right for us as young people to have conversations about race, institutional culture, and transformation at all higher education spaces. Guess what? That is exactly the subtitle of this collection. Now, this collection means a lot to me, not just because one of the editors who's here, Pedro Tupensky, is a philosopher that I love and admire from my alma mater, Rhodes University, but also because the book itself, for those of you who are academically nerdish, I guess one methodological limitation is that for the most part the stories come from Rhodes. But I think they generalize across university spaces, and they speak to the issues that are frustrating students and causing protests in Cape Town at Rhodes. And what I loved about this book is that as much as I advocate for Rhodes University as the best place, sorry UJ, to go and study, especially for a liberal arts degree, this book blows the lid of the rubbish that says that places like Rhodes are so much cooler than Stellenbosch or UFS in terms of racial politics, gender issues, sexual orientation. That is why it's such a crucial book, especially given the current timing. So if you can afford it, you definitely should buy it. It is incredibly important, and if you are a librarian, I would encourage you, as you did with my first book, to buy a hell of a lot of collections for each of your 4 libraries that you have, because really students need to engage it. It's not just a book, despite being academically peer-reviewed, that is for practitioners. This book, I think, is most useful to us as young South Africans. Which brings me finally, before I'll shut up for the moment, to I warned my boyfriend I was going to embarrass him in the introductory remarks. He looked at me when he picked me up now in the rush to get here, and looked me up and down and said, "You haven't shaven, look at how you are dressed." And I said, "It's deliberate," and it really is deliberate. And Pedro can testify to that, because we spoke about this on the phone in preparation for today. Because interestingly, when you come into UJ, the themes here are actually already experienced. It is easier to get into the Constitutional Court than to get into UJ, because your security guard are worse than the police that throw out the EFF in Parliament. So you already have a non-inclusive culture just in the physical makeup of this building that was designed, as you know, historically to try and keep out the Bantus in the case of an invasion during apartheid, hence the lack of aesthetic appeal. On top of that, there's also exclusion at the level of degrees. If it's been discovered that you quit your doctorate, then suddenly you're not good enough to be part of social discourse, and there is a subtweet for the trolls that are watching somewhere. But of course also at the level of dress symbolically, which is why the question of the Rhodes statue goes to the heart of this book. There's also a lot of exclusion that all of us feel here as young people. I love the idea of being dressed in a baseball cap coming in here, because I hate the idea that you need to be dressed in a formal manner, be a professor, in order to have a legitimate view around the question of what is your experience like at UJ? Do you feel, to the title of this book, at home in this space? Why don't you feel at home? What does it take for this to be a more inclusive space? This book is not about Rhodes University, it's about all our spaces, including this space. I taught here a short course in philosophy of sport. As a one-semester lecturer, I didn't feel inclusive in this space. And that's me with my confidence, with my ego, with my middle-class education, with my world travels. How much more if you come from a poor working-class family into a South African space? So that's why I'm dressed like that, because I'm disrupting that dominant narrative, and that's exactly what this book does. To that end, I didn't ask them, because of time constraints, in which order they will speak. But I do know that the editor, Pedro, has thought about the issues, because him and I discussed it on the phone. And I want to ask him to the podium, please. He's a philosopher based at Rhodes University. He's a fantastic creature who's not hamstrung by the analytic tradition in philosophy. I think partly because he's also an artist at heart. And the work that he does as a very careful observer on these issues is amazing. And I'm sure you're going to enjoy his viewpoint. I didn't tell him, by the way, I'm going to make him nervous now, that when he assumed that I shared what he's going to tell you, actually secretly, I profoundly disagree with what he's about to say. But I thought it'd be more fun to do it during the Q&A. Can we welcome him?
The University of Johannesburg. Rethink, reinvent.